Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers. Welcome to this third session on variant readings. In this issue, we have seen in the first two episodes that if the whole issue is divided into three historical sequences, into three historical periods, then according to Ustaz Javed Ahmed Ghamidi, we can fully and directly and precisely understand how this issue arose and what is the exact sound opinion in it. So he says that in the first period of this whole issue, we can see that it was something that belonged to the era of Prophet Muhammad. The Quran was revealed chronologically in a period of 22 years, and then it was recompiled, rearranged in a sequence. So this is the first period that we know. In the second period, we know that this is the period that was the period of the Sahaba. In his own times, Caliph Abu Bakr, he is thought to have constituted a whole Musaf so that in case of any discrepancy, it could be referred to as a state-owned collection, and of course that the need for that never arose. And then in the time of Caliph Osman, he tried to spread the Musahif into the various territories when he saw and when he was reported that it was being read in a wrong way and people were making mistakes. And we have seen some more details as well in the second episode. So in this third episode, we'll be looking at the third phase. Now, according to Ustaz, the third phase actually belongs to the successors, which are called the Tabi'un. And they begin from Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, who ruled from 65 Hijrah to 81 Hijrah, and ended with Umar ibn Abdul Aziz radhiyallahu anhu, who died in 100 Hijrah. So during this time, Roman and Persian languages were the languages of the official record. It was Abdul Malik ibn Marwan who translated all this record to Arabic, so that now it can become easier for the record to be read and to be preserved. Now, this actually prompted the development of the Arabic script. And moreover, vowel marks were not there at that time. It was after 65 Hijrah when Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, he succeeded the throne, diacritics and vowel sounds were inserted, as has been specified by Zarkali, a famous historian. And this, of course, we know that these diacritics and vowel sounds, they were inserted so that now it could become easier for people to understand. And this insertion actually impacted the Quran also. And as a result, diacritics and declensions, the nukat or the Arab, they were also inserted in the Quran. So according to Abdullah Azmi, it took place in the times of Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. So he commissioned Hajjaj, and who in turn asked some of his scholars to insert these diacritics and these declensions. So in the times of Hajjaj also we know that Muhammad ibn Qasim, he was the person who brought the Quran to the subcontinent. So we know that later on after this time there was a vast dissemination of the Quran that took place all over the Muslim empire, and we know that Ibn Hazm, while he was writing on this issue, he states that it is the Quran about which God has bound us to follow it and mandatory upon us to acknowledge it, and it stands authenticated through the transmission of every individual about which there is no possibility of doubt that it is this Quran which is written in the Masahif, famous all over the world. So he was someone, of course we know that he lived in the 3rd and the 4th centuries of Hijrah. He was penning down his book Al-Ihkam, in which he said that such was the vastness of the dissemination of the Quran that there was absolutely no doubt that what was written in the Quran was something other than what is found in the Masahif all over the world. Then later on, Ibn Khaldun, who passed away in 808 Hijrah, he writes about the Quran, and he says that the Quran is God's word revealed to his prophet, written between the two covers. It is mutawatir among the ummah. However, the companions narrated different variants from God's messenger regarding some of its words and the way they were pronounced. This was passed on, and it spread until 7 specific systems of variant readings became prominent. They were transmitted through tawatur, also with regard to their pronunciation. These 7 systems of variants were ascribed to reciters who were famous for their transmission from among many. Thus, these 7 systems of variants became the foundational ones. Then after this, more systems of variants were chosen besides the 7, except that they were from chief reciters who were not that reliable in transmission. These 7 systems of variants are widely found in Muslim books. Some people have differed in the tawatur of their variants, because to them these are merely ways of pronunciation that cannot be expressed in written form. In their opinion, this is something that does not disrupt the tawatur of the Quran. The majority has denied this and upheld the tawatur of the ways of pronunciation. Some others are of the opinion that the ways of pronunciation do not have tawatur, like prolonging the intonation of the alif and the weakening of the alif as the air is not able to grasp its pronunciation. And this is correct. The reciters continued to transmit and circulate these recitals and their transmission until various disciplines of knowledge were collected and compiled, and Quranic recitals became a specialized science and a unique branch of knowledge. People transmitted in the East and in Spain generation after generation until Abu Bakr ibn Mujahid became the ruler of Eastern Spain from among the allies of the Amirin. He was a specialist of this discipline from among other disciplines. So this is how Ibn Khaldun has stated the whole matter in his Al-Muqaddimah. Now, Ustaz Ghamidi asserts that as far as this whole issue is concerned, the preservation of the Quran, the protection of the Quran, we know that it has been mentioned in a very, very forceful way in the Quran. So in Surah Hijr, the words are, Inna nahnu nazzalna zikra wa inna lahu lahafizun. It was we who revealed the reminder and shall ourselves preserve it. Similarly, Ustaz Ghamidi says that in Surah Hamim as-Sajda, there is another, in fact, there are two verses of similar import, and the words are, وَإِنَّهُ لَكِتَابٌ عَزِيزٌ لَا يَأْتِيهِ الْبَاطِلُ مِنْ بَيْنِ يَدَيْهِ وَلَا مِنْ خَلْفِهِ تَنْزِيلٌ مِنْ حَكِيمٍ حَمِيدٍ. And there is no doubt that it is a mighty scripture. Falsehood cannot reach it, neither from in front of it nor from behind it. It is a revelation from a wise and glorious God. So, Ustaz Ghamidi says that in the presence of this scriptural assurance and this scriptural satisfaction, the qiraat of the Quran is one, as he shall make us understand in some of the forthcoming discussions that we'll be recording and discussing. So he says that if you go back to the first phase, we know that accent was given concession so that people could read in their own accents as well. For example, they could prolong a certain letter or they could shorten it. So this was something that still goes on, and people still try their best to learn tajweed and to recite the Quran in the language or in the dialect of the Quraysh. So this concession is always there. So chronological sequence and the final sequence we know were different. So now in the case of the final sequence, it was essential that once the Quran was read out in the second sequence, after it has been revealed in the revelatory sequence, it was essential to follow that sequence. Recital was also given concession as long as meanings remain synonyms in writing down and reading. This is also something that we have discussed in the first episode. So continuing from this discussion over, he says that if we look at the attitude of the companions, then companions who were leaders, who were more inclined towards administration and rulership, like Umar radhiyallahu anhu, he was the one who said that we have to stick only to the sequence that was made and drafted and given shape in the Al-Arza al-Akhira, which is the final presentation of the Quran, in which the Quran was, of course, it was rearranged. On the contrary, scholars like Ubay ibn Ka'b, anhu, he wanted to keep both sequences. He wanted to keep intact the chronological sequence as well, because he thought that we have heard this from the Prophet and we should not in any case give it up. Of course, he knew that the sequence that was final was the other sequence, but he was not willing to give up the first sequence, in the sense that he did not want anything from the mouth of the Prophet go waste. So we know there is a tradition in the Bukhari, according to Abdullah ibn Abbas, which states that Umar said that the best reciter among us is Ubay, and the best judge among us is Ali, and we would not accept the opinion of Ubay when he would say that I will not leave anything I have heard from God's messenger. And then the verse of abrogation was cited, which is the verse in Surah Baqarah which says, Ma nansakh min ayah. So we can see now clearly that there is a difference between a scholar and a political leader. And this is something that has continued ever since. The political leader of Umar's stature, and of course all others after him, they were of the opinion that it is just the Qiraatul Amma that must be given currency. And Abu Bakr, Umar, Usman, Ali, all of them, they made efforts as rulers of the Muslims. And this is something that, of course, is still pervading us. It is something that is still found in the Ummah, that at the vast level, it is these people who are, according to whom we know that there is just one Quran reading, and that is the one that was recited in the Al-Arza Al-Akhira. However, there have been people like Ubay ibn Ka'b's followers who thought that, well, we should also read the Quran, or at least preserve the Quran in its revelatory sequence as much as possible. And it seems that the top tabi'un and the scholarly people, they followed suit in this regard. And according to Abdullah Azmi in his Al-Jami al-Kamil, he has actually cited that they became centers of these scholars, and amongst these scholars, these variant readings circulated, whilst at the same time amongst the masses, it was the Al-Arza Al-Akhira or the Al-Qiraat Al-Amma that was in vogue. So according to Abdullah Azmi, in Medina we know it was Zuhri and Sayyid ibn Musayyib who were famous reciters, and of course Maaz ibn Haris also. In Makkah it was Ata, Taus and Ikrama. In Kufa it was Alqama, Shabi and Sayyid ibn Jubair. In Basra it was Hasan Basri, Ibn Sirin, Qatada. And in Syria it was Mughira ibn Abi Shihab. So these were the famous people who had their own circles of variant readings. Now Ustaz says that all narrations of variant readings, if we look at their isnad, they're all ahad. None of them actually meets the standard of tawatur in any way, and we will see that in a bit as well. So just taking cue from the fact that hadith narratives, they went through 4 different phases. Ustaz says that in a similar way, in a similar manner, these variant readings or the narratives of these variant readings also, they went through 4 phases. So as far as the 4 phases of hadith or narratives are concerned, the first phase is dissemination. The second one is specialized collection or collation in fact, and some selected seerah and some specific fiqh narratives were of course collated. Then in the third phase, these selections were evaluated and judged. And fourth, these evaluations were then disseminated, which culminated in the 6 canonical anthologies or the Sihah Sitta. So Ustaz says that in a similar way, variant readings also passed through these similar 4 phases. So in the first phase, these readings were disseminated by people called the Qurra. In the second phase, specialization were done in these readings. In the third, there were certain selections that were made. And in the fourth, dissemination occurred, which culminated in 10 great reciters. And so we know that Abdullah Azmi has made them evident as well. So these 10 reciters were in 5 main centers of the Muslim empire. So in Medina we have Nafi and Abu Ja'far. In Mecca we have Ibn Kathir. In Syria we have Abdullah ibn Amir. In Kufa we have 3, which are Asim, Hamza and Kasai. In Baghdad, which is the 5th center, we have Khalf ibn Hisham. So these people became famous in the 2nd century Hijrah. Then Abu Bakr ibn Mujahid, who died in 324 Hijrah, he actually selected 7 from them in his Kitab al-Sab'a. And later on we also see that gradually, although we cannot pinpoint the origin, we see that 3 standards of the acceptance of variant readings emerged. And these standards were that the isnad must be correctly reported back to the Prophet, the reading must be sound as far as the Arabic is concerned, and the third standard was that these readings must be in consonance with either of the Usmanic codices. So any reading which qualified or which stood or which passed these 3 standards was deemed as acceptable. So now as far as the Farai school is concerned, of course Ghamidi Saab's own opinion is concerned, he says that taking cue from Ustaz Hamiduddin Farahi, Ustaz Hamiduddin Farahi is absolutely adamant and certain. He says that as far as the Quran is concerned, it is just one reading that is legitimate, and that is the Qira'atul Amma. And in the tafsir of Surah Abi Lahab, Ustaz Farahi has said that Ajma'al Muslimun kulluhum ala hazihi al-qira'at. So his words are very, very forceful. Ajma'al Muslimun kulluhum ala hazihi al-qira'at, referring to the Qira'atul Amma. And then of course his own student, who is Amin Islahi, he has said something similar. So while writing at a particular instance in the preface of his 8th volume of his Tafsir Tadabbur al-Quran, he says that the issue of the variant readings too has been resolved in this exegesis. The conventional and mutawatir reading is the one written in this Musaf, which is in our hands today. As per this reading, the interpretation of each verse and word takes place in the light of the language of the Arabs, the context of the discourse, and parallels of the Quran in such a manner that no doubt remains. Thus I have interpreted every verse on the basis of this reading, and I can say with full confidence that interpreting the Quran on the basis of other readings, of course referring to variant readings, is only possible at the expense of sacrificing its eloquence, purpose, and wisdom. So these are the words of the two contemporaries, the two illustrious mentors of Ustaz Ghamidi, and he himself in his book Meezan has written something taking and following suit from his two predecessors. So he writes that the Quran is only what is recorded in the Musaf, and which, except for some areas of North Africa, is recited by a vast majority of the Muslim Ummah. None else except the reading on which this Quran is recited is the Quran, or can be presented in the capacity and status of the Quran. Yes, of course, as he has written, there is an exception for certain areas of North Africa, and that exception, of course, can also be something that can be understood and explained, and we'll be looking at that exception. We will see in some of the later lectures how this exception actually came into existence, and it can be understood and explained. Viewers, one important thing that Ustaz Ghamidi has also put forth in this regard is that we can see that there are certain examples of certain qiraat that when they are inserted or when they are thought to be inserted in the text of the Quran does not accept them, and it actually just spills them out of its text, and it says that these are redundant. And so he has said that, of course, although not all the qiraat can be rejected on this basis, but some very prominent ones can be clearly understood that they cannot be, even grammatically and linguistically accepted. So he has given examples that how various qiraat, if you insert them in the Musaf, then the Musaf does not accept them. So we'll just take a look at one of those examples, and this example is regarding the verse of wuzu, which of course is a famous verse. This is something that occurs in Surah Maida. This is the 6th verse, and it reads as Ya ayyuhallazina amanu iza qumtum ila as-salati faghsilu wujuhakum wa aydiyakum ila al-marafiq wamsahu bi ru'usikum wa arjulakum ila al-ka'bayn wa in kuntum junuban fattahharu wa in kuntum marda aw ala safar aw jaa'a ahadun minkum min al-gha'it أو لامستم النساء فلم تجدوا ماء فتيمموا صعيدا طيبا فامسحوا بوجوهكم وأيديكم منه. So a translation of this verse reads, believers, this very cleanliness is also needed to come in God's presence. So when you rise to pray, wash your faces and your hands as far as the elbows, and wipe your heads and wash your feet to the ankles also. And if you are ceremonially unclean, bathe yourselves to become clean. And if at times you are sick or on a journey, or when any of you has relieved himself, or if you have had intercourse with women and no water is available to you, find some clean surface and wipe your faces and your hands from it. God does not wish to burden you, He certainly seeks to purify you. Thus He makes it mandatory on you to do wuzu and take the ceremonial bath, and wants to perfect His favor upon you. Thus, in compelling circumstances, allows you to do dry ablution so that you are grateful. So viewers, this is a little bit of a technical thing that you might need to understand, but of course it is something that is very, very understandable, because the words arjulakum ilal ka'bayn, they actually warrant the fact that the feet must be washed. They cannot be wiped, as is the case that if you read this verse declined in the genitive, which would mean as arjulikum, as is the case with a variant reading. So the text of the Quran in the Qiraatul Amma is arjulakum ilal ka'bayn, and this warrants the washing of the feet. However, if it is read as arjulekum, as is the case with the variant reading, then Ustaz Ghamidi has shown that this is something which the Quran even does not accept. So the method of doing wuzu that is mentioned in these verses is that first the face shall be washed and the hands up to the elbows, and after that the whole of the head shall be wiped, and after that the feet shall be washed, if you look at the words arjulakum ilal ka'bayn. The wiping of the whole head is essential because for this directive the words used are wamsahu bi ru'usikum, which means that you wipe your head, and those who are aware of the subtleties of the Arabic language should know that on such occasions the letter ba signifies completeness. Similarly, Ustaz comes to the point now and says that it apparently seems that the directive regarding the feet is governed by the verb wamsahu, which means wipe, and hence, of course, that would mean that arjulakum would be something that you have to do, which means that you have to wipe your feet. However, the words ilal ka'bain, which means up to the ankles after arjulakum, your feet, declined in the accusative, are decisive that this directive is actually coordinated to aydikum, your hands. Had they been coordinated to biru'usikum, your heads, the words ilal ka'bain, up to the ankles, would have been redundant. And we can see this from the verses of tayammum, which wherever wiping has been mentioned. So the verses of tayammum where wiping has been mentioned, they have not been made conditional to ilal marafiq, because wiping something to the marafiq, it would be needless, or to the elbows, it would be needless. So we can clearly see that the feet shall necessarily be washed, and their directive has been merely deferred to keep intact the sequence of washing the limbs. So in fact, people who think that declension should be arjulekum, they think that it is because of the ba that has entered there in biru'usikum. But because of the fact that we have the words ilal ka'bain means up to something. So something can only be washed up to something. There is no need to wipe something up to something, as is the case with the other instances where the instance of dry wuzu or dry ablution or tayammum has been mentioned. We know that at that instance ilal marafiq has not been made conditional. So it essentially should be understood that the word arjulakum is something which is decisive, that feet have to be washed, and basically the whole directive has been coordinated to aydikum, which means that you have to wash the feet. The reason that this sequence has to be preserved was it seems that there was some deviation in the sequence of washing the limbs. Otherwise, of course, it was clearly known that feet have to be washed and they are not to be wiped. So this is how the Quran itself does not accept the variant reading arjulekum, according to which feet can be wiped. This is how Ustaz had explained it. Inshallah, in our coming sessions, we'll be coming up with more explanations regarding his view about the variant readings.